Have you ever felt like you're speaking a totally different language than your parents or maybe your kids? Well, you're not wrong. But what if all those frustrating misunderstandings aren't actually about different values? What if it's something way deeper, something that was wired into us from the very beginning?
So here's the big idea we're going to dig into. It's that every single generation is psychologically programmed by the world they grew up in. It's like their childhood environment installs a unique operating system that controls how they see everything, from risk to work to authority. So if we really want to understand each other, we have to go back and look at that original blueprint.
All right, let's start with the kids of the post-war generation. Think about it for a second. They were raised by people who had lived through a global catastrophe and literally had to rebuild the world from scratch. So the environment they created for their kids wasn't about coddling feelings. Nope. It was about order, predictability, and rules everyone shared. It was all designed to make sure chaos never kicked down the door again.
And this is where their idea of freedom gets really fascinating. Yeah, kids back then could wander for miles and be gone all day. But here's the thing. They were never really anonymous. There was this web of eyes. Every neighbor, every person at the corner store, they were all like backup parents. Authority was everywhere, and your reputation was public. It taught them a really powerful lesson. Freedom and accountability are basically two sides of the same coin.
Wow, this quote just nails their relationship with risk. Their playgrounds were literally made of iron and asphalt. If you slipped, you met the ground hard. And nobody rushed in calling it a trauma. You just learned. You calibrated. You figured out how fast is too fast or how high is too high. Pain wasn't some crisis you had to avoid at all costs. It was just data. It taught you that you could take a hit, get back up, and keep going.
So, the bottom line is the psychological software this all installed. It wired them for quiet competence, for resilience, for self-regulation. You didn't talk about being tough, you just were. And failure? Failure wasn't the end of the world, it was just information you could use to try again differently. This is the blueprint for a generation that was built for structure and built to last.
So how did that blueprint evolve? Well, the next generation, Gen X, they got their operating system installed in that world the boomers built. But with a critical difference. The adults were often gone. They were at work. And all those big institutions their parents trusted were starting to show some serious cracks. This experience is right at the core of their psychological programming. Just picture it. The quiet house, that key on a string around your neck, the hum of the refrigerator being the only sound. This environment, this sort of benign neglect, it taught a brutal lesson, and it taught it early. Help isn't automatic, comfort isn't guaranteed, and you'd better learn to solve your own problems, quietly.
And this created the great Gen X paradox. On the one hand, it gives them this incredible superpower, hyper-independence. You can throw almost any crisis at them, and they'll handle it, because they had to. But the hidden cost is huge. When you grow up with the deep-seated belief that nobody will come, you become an adult who can survive anything but has a really hard time asking for help or even knowing how to accept it when it's offered.
And this perfectly decodes their famous cynicism. It's not apathy, it's a super sophisticated defense mechanism. After watching things like Watergate, the Challenger explosion, and just endless phony advertising, they developed a world-class BS detector. So whatever isn't armor for their indifference, it's armor for their heart. It's a way of keeping expectations low so you can't get crushed by disappointment.
Now we get to this fascinating little micro-generation, the Xennials. They weren't fully analog like Gen X, and they weren't fully digital like the Millennials. They were born right on the hinge of history, and that unique timing created a completely different kind of psychological wiring. This timeline really shows their unique journey, right? Their childhoods were filled with the slow, physical world of boredom and bikes, but their teenage years were punctuated by that piercing, screeching song of a dial-up modem, a doorway into a brand new reality. They are the very last generation to remember the before times and the very first to come of age in the after.
This experience gave them a really rare psychological advantage, something you could call technological bilingualism. They just intuitively understand the patience and the logic of the pre-internet world, but they also fluently adapted to the speed and connectivity of the digital age. This basically makes them the natural translators between the old guard and the new. These two memories right here perfectly capture their dual citizenship. When you hold both of those experiences in your head, the tactile, physical past and the intangible digital future, it creates a really unique worldview. It's this blend of Gen X skepticism and millennial optimism.
It makes them uniquely comfortable with transition, because they literally grew up inside of one.
So when you put this all together, the conflicts we see today suddenly become a lot clearer. See, we're not really arguing about values. What we're experiencing is a clash of programming. It's a collision of different psychological operating systems, and each one was perfectly adapted to a world that might not even exist anymore.
This table lays it all out pretty clearly. You've got boomers and 70s kids who are wired for resilience in a world of shared rules. You've got Gen X, wired for self-reliance in a world where you are often on your own. And then you've got Xennials, wired for adaptability, becoming the bridge between two totally different realities. Each blueprint is a completely logical response to the environment that created it.
And that, of course, brings us to the most important question of all. Because understanding these past blueprints isn't just a history lesson. It's about right now. Looking at our modern world of constant connectivity, of managed risk, of a fully digital life, we have to ask, what operating system, what kind of psychological blueprint are we installing in the generations being raised right now?